So welcome to the site visit of Växjö. I am Carolina Wikström, General Secretary of Europan Sweden. And from the municipality of Växjö, I would like to present Samuel Palmblad, first antiquarian building curator. Can you wave with your hand? Yes. And then we have Henrik Wibroe, city architect of Växjö. Yes. And then we have Sebastian Gårendal, planning architect. He's not here today, right? Sebastian?
No.
No. And then we have Emma Beck, communication officer. Yes. And then Isak Hammarström, communication officer as well. Perfect. And we would like to inform you all about that we will record this site visit and make a video which will be uploaded later on Europan Europe's website. And if you have any questions during the site visit, write them in the chat, and then we will collect them and ask them loud so everyone hears the question. And if there is any questions from the person who is participating live now in Växjö, it's very important that everyone who is participating digital hear the question. And remember, all the questions should be asked in English. And now we look very much forward to the site visit of Växjö. And I give the word to Växjö municipality. The floor is yours.
All right. Then we are here in Växjö, sending out in the air. Welcome to Växjö. Welcome to Växjö City Hall, this new building construction all in wood, and 16,000 square meters living area, isn't it? But it is office area and station area. So we will now walk around and make this site visit, and Samuel and I will help you, and it's Samuel some makes the most talking, I hope. So Samuel, let's walk.
Yes. My name is Samuel Palmblad and I work at the museum here in Växjö, and I'm specialized in building conservation. So we'll take a walk around the hospital block and I will tell you some stories about the buildings and the hospital. So I think we can start.
Det är väldigt konstigt när vi inte har det liksom. Vi var inte med i filmen liksom.
If it's possible to stay here somewhere. Ja, jag tänkte. Unfortunately, the cherry trees is not have any flower left. Anyway, in 1865, the railway station in Växjö was inaugurated. And of course, it was a major event and very important for the city. And the second half of the 19th century, there was a sort of a positive atmosphere in Växjö. No more city fires, the population increased, and there were a lot of public building being erected. And you can say that there were few factories, but the town itself, it was dominated of educational institutions and public officials. And because of these events, the increased population and so on, the city needed more space. And in 1874, there was a new city plan presented. And what shall I say? It concerned the other part of the southern part of the railway, where we're standing now. And this area consisted of fields, of meadows, and swamps, and so on. But it was a good area to start building, actually. So the first project that was realized was the hospital. In 1879, it was opened. And in 1885, this museum building was erected. It's the oldest museum building outside Stockholm, and it's the oldest county museum in Sweden. And after that, one of my personal favorites in Växjö was finished. It was the grammar school, and I have to show you a picture of this splendid building in 1889. So when you looked at, if you look at photos from this time, you can see the museum building, the hospital, and this impressive grammar school. And there was a lot of green areas. So I have to say it was a very beautiful part of Växjö. And during this time, the sea level was much higher, much higher. And of course, Växjö was a small town, and the building that dominated almost everything was the cathedral from the 12th century. So here we have a sort of a garden city, I have to say. Okay, we will pass the street, and I'm not responsible for traffic, so you have to look left and right. Jag har jobbat med sjukhuset. Jag vet inte säkert.
Det är kul, då får man guida runt internationella arkitekter.
Ja, det är den, jag jobbar ju. Okay. In 1960, a general plan for the hospital was presented, and there was a lot of discussion during this time. Is it maybe better to build a new hospital outside the city? But because of the existing infrastructure and the facilities and all investments being already made, they decided to, well, continue here. So in 1967, this main building was erected. And, well, many people think it's quite ordinary, nothing special. Some think it's ugly, maybe. Typical architecture from the 1960s. But there are one thing that is quite special here, because when the county council decided to actually build this, they also wanted something extraordinary in the facade. So you see this greenish wall here, and it continues all the way. And before it was the same below the windows. This is actually glass from Kosta. You know Kosta, one of the most famous glass factories in Sweden. This sort of tile is individual. Every tile is different from each other. So this was a huge investment, actually. It costs a lot of money. And because Kosta made this during only 3 years, this is a very unique product. There are very few buildings in Sweden where you can see this. The finest example is actually in Västerås. So quite unique. And when the sun shines on it, it's, well, vivid. And also inside the main entrance, there is one of my favorite artworks. The floor is made of different stone materials and is made in a special mathematical pattern called Penrose gitter. And Penrose was a British famous mathematical. So if you have time, go inside. It's a marvelous floor and a little psychedelic, I have to say. So I used to talk about this glass material because it's so cool, I have to say. There are very few people actually that know that it's glass. They thought it's some ceramic or something, but it's glass actually from Kosta. Okay, then we walk again. Okay. The new hospital in Växjö was opened in 1879. And of course, there was a lot of writing in the local newspapers. The journalists were very proud, and they said it was the finest building in Växjö. And of course, the place is, well, quite nice. But when the hospital was erected here, this ground didn't existed. So high was the sea level. And the architect, it was Johan Fredrik Åbom, quite famous Swedish architect during this time. He's responsible for a lot of hospitals, prisons, churches, and public buildings in Sweden. He made a sort of a small castle here, I have to say. And maybe you can see something here. Typical neoclassical and neo-Renaissance style. And when the county council decided that we will actually build a hospital, it's a huge investment, of course. They wanted a place close to the city, but not that close. During this time, experts and doctors and so on wanted a place with a lot of green areas, close to the water, because patients will recover better if there was a beautiful surrounding. And this was a perfect place, quite close to the center, but not too close. But of course, when we have a hospital, we have new knowledge about medical treatment and medicine. More and more people came and wanted help. So quite quickly, the county council realized we need more buildings. It's too small. So just a few years later, they started to build more. And in 1902, there was a large extension here. And again, more people came, and it's accepted to go to hospital because that's just hocus pocus. But more and more people came, and more doctors arrived, nurses, administration personnel. So in early 1930s, the county council board realized we need a new hospital, a total new hospital. And that hospital was opened in September 1939, the same month and same year when the Second World War broke out. So Växjö has a very modern hospital, and we thought that Germany will attack us. Of course, they attacked Norway and Denmark. So there was a lot of contingency planning here, and the purpose was to take care of wounded soldiers. And during the whole Second World War and during the Cold War, there was a lot of planning to take care of maybe thousands of wounded soldiers from the south of Sweden. And as you can see, there's nothing left of the original hospital. It's demolished. The only thing that remains is the old gate here. And these, what shall I say, blocks are from the 80s and 90s. And I like, when I work with building conservation, I really like bricks. It's one of my favorite materials. So when you look here, you can see the brickworks below the windows and also between the windows, and it's different colors in the bricks. And it gives a sort of a vivid facade. I don't think it's a beautiful building, but you have to look at the details. You can see some fine parts, actually. Yeah, I like it anyway. I think we continue. New questions? Jag säger bara en sak snabbt. Well, I almost forgot, but I have to tell you about this avenue of trees because Växjö is surrounded with esplanades, and it's quite typical for Växjö, and it's preserved. It makes Växjö quite unique. And this is maybe the most impressive part with these 4 lines of trees. And these esplanades was important because it made communications easier, but it was also important to reduce the spread of fire. So when you see the esplanades surround Växjö, for example, it reduced the spread of fire. Very important because Växjö has been burned so many times. In some occasion, it was Danes. We fought a war against Denmark, so they burnt everything. Or it was just a mistake. Some were cooking or something, and there was a huge fire in Växjö so many times. So look at the trees. Nu är vi så pass många så vi ställer oss i arenan. Annars var ju tanken så på trottoaren.
Alltid så när man går markteknik. Man droppar av en efter en.
Är det så?
Ja, så måste man liksom putta ihop den sen. Ta det fem
Vänta in lite.
Ja. Precis.
Men
För de var med oss, eller?
ja,
Ja, vi kan väl.
det är mysigt för ni blir bara fler och fler. För de sent som arkitekter. Det blir oj, tuppen. Det är liksom påfyllning.
Ja.
Det är lite långsamt.
Och så skriver de av.
Well, well. If we had stood here in the early 1980s, you could have seen an incredible mixture of buildings from almost every decade since the hospital was opened in 1879. So was from the, every decade. But during the 80s and 90s, most of them were demolished. And you can see these huge blocks from this time. But here we have from the 60s and the white building from 54, and just behind we have a building from 1939 and so on. But was a little bit unfortunate because some of the buildings that were demolished were very interesting and I have to say quite unique. But anyway, they are gone. So when you look at this white building with white plaster, it's from 1954 and I think it's good looking. It's quite distinct and at the same time sleek with this typical modernistic features. And I really like this balcony. And the doctor say it's very popular to sit on this balcony. So there are some parts of the hospital, you can see these annual rings. And some of them are, I have to say, really good looking. And this is actually one of my favorites. And again, we have this avenue of trees. And in the end of this esplanade, we have the elementary school from 1914, and it works like a sort of eye catcher. It's quite typical in Växjö that we have buildings that catch the eye in the end of a road, for example. And I said in the beginning that in Växjö there was a lot of educational institutions. There were students coming from all over the southeastern part of Sweden. So here, for example, was a school for blind children. And a few hundred meters away, we have a school for deaf students, and so on. So there were many school buildings. And when we talk about this need for green areas, this is one of the most popular parks in Växjö, Strandbjörket. So you can see patients when they're recovered, they take a walk. So when my children were born here and I had some rest, I took a walk in the park here. And you can see the tennis courts. Maybe you have heard about the Swedish tennis wonder that begins in Växjö, I have to say. So I think this is an important part of Växjö, these esplanades. And as you can see, it open the cityscape and we have this eye catcher in the end. Yeah, we have to be careful about these trees and esplanades. Okay, if there are no questions, we will take a little longer walk around this school for blind people, and then we take a stop on a parking place, actually. Ja.
Jag lämnar den till.
Grejen är att det är inte för de här.
Får jag bara säga att vi har fått en fråga här i chatten, så när det passar så kan vi ställa den.
Mm.
And now we have 2 questions in the chat.
Har du sist, Henrik?
Yes.
Okay. In 1903, another school was erected here. It was a school for girls. And again, as typical for this time, it was an impressive building. And in 1982, it was demolished because they needed more parking space for the hospital. Quite unfortunate, I think. But in this building, there was very special, and there was a lot of contingency planning for the war. And in May 45, there was actually, this plan was tested, because the 3rd of May 1945, members from the Civil Defense Board knocked on the door to the school, and the principal were ordered to evacuate every student immediately. And in 24 hours, the whole school was transformed for medical treatment. And what happened? The 4th of May, the day after, train arrived to Växjö with people from the concentration camps in Germany. There were mostly women from France, Belgium, Holland, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Luxembourg, almost every part of Europe. And these women were in very bad shape, and it wasn't enough space in the hospital. And therefore, according to this contingency plan, they took the building. So all the students were spread all over Växjö in churches and so on. So for several months, these women were treated here, and they suffered a lot, of course. And after that, the hospital still had an important role during the Cold War, specifically for treatment of soldiers. So below us here, there's a tunnel system, and it was finished in 1987. It was a huge investment. And the tunnel started there, and it goes under the hospital and spread. And the purpose is to make the hospital self-sufficient with water, electric power, and so on. So the tunnel's function is to make sure that the hospital can work during wartime. And for example, below the hospital, there are bomb shelters for over 1,400 people. Quite impressive. And there are quite few people today that know about these concentration camps prisoners that arrived in hundreds to Växjö and other places also in this county. And therefore, it was such a good privilege, I have to say, that they had this contingency plan. They just took the building, and in 24 hours, there was hundreds of mostly French women and Polish women that was transported from the railway station to this school. And I've been looking for photos from this event. I haven't found it, but I'm writing a book about it. So this is a story I think is very important to talk about when we talk about the hospital. And I think we had some questions also. Are the mid-century hospital buildings appreciated by the general population in Växjö? I think that when people go to the hospital, they don't look at the buildings. And I think that most people in Växjö don't actually know so much about this, I have to say. That's my answer. The Cold War story, along with the relevance of the hospital at that time, is a positive element of identity for the city, or brings rather bad memories. I don't think people in Växjö have any bad memories. I think the few people that know about these contingency plans actually are proud, because when we look at the war in Ukraine today, these facilities and these what shall I say, this planning are so important. And today we do the same planning as we did during the Second World War, almost, to take care of wounded soldiers. We need blood, we need a lot of equipment and so on. So I don't think it's a bad memory, but it's a sort of a scary story maybe for some. Okay, I think we have a short stop finally, if there's any more question.
Is there any questions here? Is there anyone that a question to Samuel or to me, or a question? No?
Then we take a last stop. Okay, some last things about these annual rings. For example, this building with yellow bricks is from 1960, and then here 1954, and that part that with white plaster is from 1939. We have 1961, and the higher part 1967, and then it continues. So it's a total mixture, and that makes it quite interesting, I have to say. And again, this unique facade material with glass tiles from Kosta. Remember this from Växjö now? Very, very cool, I have to say. I will stop here if there's nothing else you wonder, or and maybe Henrik will give you some coffee later.
Well, I just want to say, can I be close to Samuel and you hear me? I would just want to say thank you for being here, for coming here to Växjö, and I will give you spark i röven and make the truth and the thing that I hope that you will make something very, very good for Växjö. That's why we are doing this competition. A map on a paper you can follow with until the city hall, so I can find it there. A map for this city walk that we make here. So I just want to say thank you for being here.
Yeah. And if you want, I can show you this stone floor, but we are not allowed to film inside the hospital, I think. But I can walk with just behind here, if you want to.
Yes, but should we then, who is participating on Zoom, should we also follow, or should we stop
cannot
now?
show you the stone floor. I'm sorry. Because everybody has to see the same and hear the same things. And we can't go walk in there and film and say that. So actually Samuel has to go home now.
Yes, so then we say thank you very much for a very interesting site visit.
Can we then walk there with Samuel? No.
They are saying thank you from this.
They say thank you from Europan. Very good.